I mean,
This is your field, and you gonna say the wrong term. That's how you gonna start the show.
Oh, whatever.
You bring a pro on, and then look what happens.
Right.
Low key on vacation.
Amateur day.
And I had a little shot of tequila.
Oh, that's smart. So when you go ahead and put that out there, so later when you hear this, you be like, "Well, I was talking wild."
Right.
Yeah.
Out here wilding.
It is Cinco de Mayo though, so
Cinco de Mayo.
you gotta have your tequila today. You gotta have your tacos. I know y'all listening to this on the 6th or later, but in the spirit of Cinco de Mayo, we are turning up already today. So
on that tequila.
hate to hear it, but that's what it is. And I know we hear another voice. So of course we got me, Lex, today, Carlie as always,
Hey, yeah.
and we have our friend Briana Clearly who's here with us as well. Go ahead and give them your @ before we even get started, so they can go ahead and research while they listening, so they can see what you looking like and all of that.
Okay. My @ is Briana, Briana with 1 N. Clearly, like obviously,
and right. So
you know what I'm saying.
No underscores, no nothing special.
No.
Okay.
The one and only original.
That part.
But how y'all feeling?
Oh, I was trying to get to the part about the screenshot when we on social media
Lex
too.
is feeling hungry.
So let's just get to it. Let us know that y'all listened to the episode. Screenshot at Carlie's Couch on Instagram and Twitter. And please, pretty please, go leave us a review. But 5 stars only. Don't play us.
Yeah, we need some new stuff to read too. So we need y'all to leave some reviews. You can also follow Briana, our guest today, who we're about to introduce. Leave her some comments as well. And let's kind of, I guess, get into it with the introduction. So Briana, she is in town in LA from Chicago. And I'll let her tell you like where she's from and all of that, what set she claims. Ooh. But essentially she is a...
Bless you.
Ooh, the tequila to hit my throat crazy.
Hey, see?
No pause. No pause.
Briana is
early.
a director. And we met, interestingly enough, because I was on Instagram being a creep as always, and I was on, shout out Lawrence Locke. I was on Locke's page and saw, oh, you have some fire photos you was putting up all of a sudden, like out of nowhere. You know, he has the gentleman's wardrobe, so already he dresses nice and got his little style together. But the photos were so much different than what I'd seen from him before that I commented on there, was like, yo, who's your creative director? Like, what's going on here? Like, because can I get some shots? You know what I mean? And he tagged Briana. And as soon as I saw she was in Chicago, I realized I was traveling out there soon because of my startup work with Sway Brand that's based in Chicago. And so when I got out there for doing that work, I pulled her in. Off top, she started directing some little videos on swaybrand.com. She did the video about the startup, and she's been doing a little bit of work as well with the founder since then. But it's been really cool that, you know, you connect with people online, just like Carlie and I connect online, and then you actually do some shit, and you actually like bring a little, you know, some dollars into the mix. So,
hello.
Briana is an example of one of those people where we met, hit it off, and so now she's back in town. So we wanted to get her on the podcast while we can. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh,
I know you was here to turn up and do your thing, but
Actually, that's not true. But
I'm about it.
No, I was just saying, you know, we're continuing to work. So I have you in on like my thesis project, which is a really big thing. And so that's really kind of what this is about. We actually ain't done enough work,
right?
To be honest.
Right.
But, you know, I appreciate you guys having me on here on your platform.
So then let's get into it as far as what you do.
Well, yeah, I'm a filmmaker. Specifically, I write and direct. And yeah, I just kind of fell into it. I thought that I would be doing more work like this, podcasting, hosting, which of course, you know, I feel like I still would be able to do at some point, but yeah, I kind of fell into filmmaking. I think I just kind of like the idea that you can take something from seed to tree in a relatively short time and just see that manifestation process, all the way through. And I think it's a really interesting art form that you can be very vocal in. You can make it entertainment. You can do a blend of both. It's very vast and underutilized to an extent. But I mean, we can kind of get into that even more.
How can you say that film is underutilized?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do feel that way. I feel like now in this day and age where the technology is so accessible, that people aren't, they're wanting to express themselves as filmmakers, but I think that a lot of people don't get into the storytelling aspect as much as they are interested in special effects and these transitions. Like they're into the technical stuff, but as far as like the storytelling aspect, I feel like the storytelling aspect of filmmaking is something that's underutilized.
No, I love that, and I agree. So before, just backtracking, so you said you kind of fell into filmmaking. What were you doing? Like, so you alluded to doing like podcasts and other things. Yeah. How did you fall into filmmaking?
So yeah, it's really interesting. Y'all really about to get my whole little past life situation. So I was I was in the Navy for about 4 years, and I went in with the understanding like this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Thank you. Yeah, it was lit. It was a cute little situation. But I went in.
I ain't never heard of it before.
You know, we're gonna keep it positive. Okay. So I went in with the thought that this is not what I'm gonna do, but let me set myself up for something different. I didn't even think I was gonna go to school, to be honest. I was just like, let me get out of debt. Let me figure out what I'm gonna do. And while I was in the Navy, I did start a podcast. Lord, I don't even want to say the name because y'all might be able to pull up some archives. So when I got out, I was like, boom, I want to kind of like get into TV broadcasting, radio broadcasting. And when I applied for schools, when I was looking for programs, I actually found a program that was called radio and TV broadcasting. So I was like, oh, bet this is perfect. And it ended up being something that was more behind the scenes. And what really changed my trajectory was an editing class that I took. And I still hate editing to this day. But it was, my professor was like, well, maybe if you shoot your own stuff, you'll like it a little bit more. And that's kind of like where everything changed. So I was like, okay, I'm going to, over the course of time, I decided I was going to invest in this. And it's been a really good thing for me. I graduated with a bachelor's in digital cinema. And now I'm in my master's program for directing. And so, yeah, we committed. Awesome. Super committed.
What are some of your biggest highlights thus far, or biggest parts of that filmmaking journey for you?
Oh, man. You know what? It's crazy because I feel like I don't celebrate my wins enough. So I'll say things so lackadaisical, but I've screened at this, it's not like a contest, it's more like a showcase, but you have to be chosen for it. It's Gentleman Jack's Reel to Reel. I had an experimental doc screen there. I've had work screen at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, which is a really cool thing. I don't even know how I be falling into this stuff, but it just happens. I've been to a couple of film festivals. So, it's just, I just appreciate that people are recognizing the work and, want to give it a place.
Well, then also talk about your work and your style. Like, what is a signature of Briana? What are those stories that you're trying to tell? What is it that, means something to you when it comes to the films you've made and are working on?
I definitely am a person who is very intentional, as a Black woman, and seeing the lack of representation. I definitely always focus on Black women's stories. It's very rare that you're going to see anything other than my protagonist being a Black woman. It's just not really what I do at this point. And not only that, I just really think it's important on the opposite side of that, me as a Black woman, like knowing that's my purpose, being very intentional about, let me bring more Black women into the fold. So yeah, I think that is one thing that you're going to notice. But then also, I'm really a big person when it comes to capturing nuance. Human life and relationships. Relationships are really, really complex. And a lot of the way that we communicate in relationships is with silence or through subtext. And so I like to capture that aspect in my art as well. Like finding those spaces where it's just like, oh, I get that.
You don't have to explain it.
Yeah,
so much.
yeah. And just kind of like really leaning into the gray area of life, of perspective, of relationships. So, yeah, I feel like that's it. And then also, I love kind of addressing social issues within the context of an intimate relationship as well.
When you say intimate relationships, do you mean romantic specifically?
They don't always have to be romantic.
Okay.
It could be familial. It could be a friendship that's really close. I just kind of like to play. I really want to master the art of nuance. Like that's really my goal, is to master the art of nuance and then do it from the perspective of Black women. So,
but when you say the art of nuance, is that also like a scene by scene thing? Like when you're looking at these two people communicate, how do you, show more without saying everything? Or do you mean it even from a bigger point of view? And that's just me being curious about that.
What do you mean from a bigger point of view?
I don't know, like at the end of the movie, you're like, oh, it was really this, or is it something
well,
bigger?
I think, and this is the great thing about, I feel like, film school, if you're, because this is where you learn the art of storytelling. You can do
you
YouTube.
learn the art of storytelling?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll kind of go on to a grander thing and then I'll scale back into your question. But I think that this is the key difference between going to YouTube University, where you really learn the technicality, how to make things look good, how to make things look high quality, how to, do really cool transitions, how to do filters and color corrections and all those things. But what film school teaches you is the art of storytelling, how to make a story that hits home to people, how to make sure that what you're trying to say is actually coming across. The value of feedback from people who are also in the same field as you is invaluable. Like being able to say, okay, I'm writing something, and then have it workshopped by 8 people, 10 people who also write. It's like, okay, now I really know what's working based on the fact that you guys are also at the same level as me, sometimes beyond, you know what I mean? But for that, give me the question again.
What is the nuance at just a technical scene level, or is there a bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I don't want to say if you're doing it right, because there's all types of ways to do it, but
whatever your intent is, I guess.
I feel as though every scene that you create should feel like an individual story, should feel like almost like an episode.
Like you could watch this few minutes of a complete kind of,
and get something different. And it'll have its own context. And then within the grander scheme of the film, it'll have a greater context or hopefully a layered context. So that's kind of like how I try to treat each scene when I write, is this is its own separate entity to a degree, and like, what is it trying to say? But then also, how does it push the story forward?
But do you like writing better, directing, or?
All of it is tedious.
Isn't it hard to not be a part of all of it, because as an artist, I would think, like, even if I didn't write it, like, let me change this a little bit, or, with the lighting, it should be this. Like, I feel like I'd want my name on everything.
Filmmaking is a team sport. I'm actually I'm kind of to the point where I'm like, I wonder what it would be like if I were to take someone else's script and direct it and, like, add my own sauce to it. And then, again, I feel like if you're doing it right, you have a DP who's got an aesthetic and they've got their own kind of vision, and they can take what you've given them and say, okay, well, let's do this. Or I could see the lighting being like this for this, or I could see the blocking for the characters to be like this, which further pushes the story. And then, you have your production designers like, oh, okay, well, based on the personality traits that I feel like you've given them, I feel like this would be a good color for them, or let's, put a whole bunch of stuff in this corner because maybe that little there's an area of their life that's kind of messy, even though they try to keep it together. Then you have your costume designers like, oh, okay, well, I see this person being, kind of refined, so let's put them in something very structured because they're a little bit rigid. And so it's just like all these people who have their little expertise coming into one project really pulls it all together. So you want to have a vision, but you also want to be very flexible and adaptable with that vision. So, I say that to say I appreciate being able to get my own ideas out, but I would really like the opportunity to take someone else's script and be like, okay, let me see what I
you
can
can really just focus on your part.
And then it'll still be me because of
That's
what
what
I
you're
bring
bringing.
to it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't think people realize how many people are involved and how many little nuances in general. Like, as you're saying, I'm like, man, I never even thought about these things, and it's so cool. But to the art of storytelling and really learning that, I feel like you said, like YouTube University, and then actually going to school for it and hearing from these writers, like, what has been the biggest lesson you've learned, or one of the lessons that have helped you shift your thinking when looking at these projects and at your ideas?
I think finding who I was as a filmmaker happened. You know, I go to a PWI. I got my bachelor's from the same place that I'm currently getting my master's. And, you know, just as a Black woman, you always notice if you're the only one in the room, or if you're one of a couple in the room. And I also felt like, just instinctively, I had to have this pushback to where it's like, okay, if I'm gonna be Black, I gotta be Black. Can I cuss on here?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm gonna be Black, I gotta be Black as fuck out here. Like, and I have to be very unapologetic about that. But like the self-awareness of that. So I think sometimes you push really, really hard, but then you kind of get into a groove to just be like, you know, if you're telling a good story, if you are giving people visuals that are stimulating and they can kind of relate to something about it, really doesn't matter who's on the screen. You know what I'm saying? So I can still be true to myself, and I can still be mindful about representing Black women, but also know that the themes that I might be touching on are universal. So I think just like finding who I was as a filmmaker and my purpose, and that's different for everybody. You know, some people it's just like, okay, I want to, you know, talk about the complexities with children and parents, or I want to talk about being kind of like the person that's outcast, the goofy person. I think that whatever it is, you have to be true to who you are and not try to ride a wave. And I think that happens a lot of times with people. I mean, again, I go to a PWI. Most of the people in the directing program are men, mainly white men. And I think in where we're at right now, where diversity, which I hate that word, but diversity is a thing that people are scrambling for. I think white men are like, okay, how can I tell these stories that aren't necessarily sincere to them? And I would encourage anybody to tell stories that are sincere to you. And for me, it's not about you just like putting a Black face on your story. If you really want to be diverse, you need to do it from behind the camera. And I find that that's something that's happening, is like you just try to throw a Black face or tell your version of a Black story, but there's nobody behind the camera that's like checking to see if what you're doing is accurate.
Yeah. How do you tell a story that's not yours to tell?
I mean, authors do it all the time. Artists create worlds, and it's not always from a place that's super close to you. But I think that there are ways that you can tell stories and then bring in other voices, bring in other perspectives that add a sincerity to it, add accuracy to it.
Because I think even with some of the films recently, like with Hidden Figures and with the one with Mahershala, where he was
the Green Book.
So, like, for example, off top, you're like, oh, this is, you know, about a Black person or about celebrating the Black people, but
it wasn't.
It's almost like it's kind of tricking you, where it's really white savior complex, or really, well, why is this white man the main character? You know?
Yeah, and it was also for older white people with the audience.
Right, so there's ways where it's like, oh, we gonna make the Black people feel this one, but then
and that's the trick again. That's the trick of this idea of putting a Black face on a story,
or it's even
to make it feel like
it
should have been. But it's like we have to dig a lot deeper, and I think that that's the interesting thing about where we are right now. As like a culture and as a society, is that we're digging a little bit deeper and we're challenging stuff. And, you know, it's a fine line between that and sensitivity, but I think that it is important for us to discuss what's going on and how we're being represented and who's representing us and why are you like, what's your motive? What's your intention behind this? Because it's like, okay, we can do better than that.
We can see through that.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, if we're doing that, now what's the next step? Okay, let's now do our due diligence to find people who are telling really genuine stories, telling sincere stories, and lift them up and give them a platform to do so.
So then how do you feel about the current playing field of actual Black people who are in film and television? So, for example, like with Atlanta and them having a little bit more nuance in their episodes where they're not really all the way explaining stuff, but if you know, you know, with Issa Rae, with Lena Waithe, you know, and all of these folks who have now gotten so much spotlight that it's almost like it's kind of cooler now to like, oh, well, let's get Black women in place because we see the success behind that. How do you feel about kind of that shift now? Do you feel like it's making it easier for you, or that
I would hope so. I mean, I guess I pray it's not a phase. I mean, Black women in entertainment is a wave. I just hope the tide stays high. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I just hope this tide stays high, because the thing is just like, once they let you in, what are you doing? And then are you preparing for the point when the shift happens? So I think if we're creating companies, like why you have the say so, are you creating a space for you to be a gatekeeper? Because the shift will happen. It will come to a point where it's like, all right, done with this. That was fun. Let's go back to, you know, what we do. Let's make America great again. So I think that's kind of the thing. Like, it's a really great time, but I hope people are preparing for the shift, because it's going to take a long time for us to really make it equal to the point where it's like, it doesn't matter if this big corporation is letting us in or not. Like, we still have the space to create what we want to create without needing approval from whoever.
Yeah, because really the networks still aren't, you know, minority owned, or the, you know, the big studios at the top. Like, it's really like 3 companies that run all of it, right? So it's really interesting.
I think it's like a big 6, but something
and
like that.
No, you're right, because I'm thinking music, 3, like Universal, and there's like 2 others in music. Like, and you didn't even realize that they run everything, like the whole world. So it's so interesting how, you know, it's like, oh yeah, we cool. You know, Issa Rae got her production company, Lena got her production company. People were getting their things, you know, in order and starting to build. But you're still, you know, and to a degree, given that space and have that space because this is what's hot now. So I know y'all gonna get the money and bring the ratings, and it still somehow connects to that. But I guess that's clearly, you know, the work in progress of being Black in America, where you're building that space for yourself and trying to create it to the point where you can own it too.
Yeah, we're still building. That's the thing. And that's why it's like, it's really important for us to have such a support system and like really nurture that support system, because nothing right now is guaranteed. We just don't own enough. So when you see people that are attempting to create these platforms, like, we really have to be supportive of it as best we can.
And now it's an interesting time as well because of the access that we have with tech, and that, you know, even when you log online, you see all these super cool ass videos that kids in high school like editing, and, you know, they putting all the effects on it, and they're like really directing and like really making cool stuff. But then I can turn on the TV and watch the Today Show tomorrow, and, you know, a white kid is doing that thing, or they're playing that Black kid's video, but they're not really getting anything from it either, you know? Or it's like, what is the resources and understanding, well, how can you do this and get paid for it and like make this a real living? And
that's what I'm trying to figure out, Sha.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess which leads us to, you know, you spoke to for a second, but what is it that you're working on now with your thesis and with your work?
Yeah, before I even get into the specifics, I feel like it's important, one, again, to find your voice as any type of artist. I think that's really, really important, because that kind of dictates where you go from there. And then you can be very intentional about what you do, so that you have a through line when people are like, okay, well, what have you done? And it looks very
like you had it together, a reason.
Exactly.
That's
you know
smart.
what I'm saying?
That's really
So
good advice.
I think I think the first thing you have to do is first create things and just kind of like get a feel for it and get a feel for what you like, because like you said, there are a lot of things that you can do within this field. You don't just have to be a director or a DP or an editor or whatever. There's a lot of different things that you can do that all add to the story. But then you also need to be very aware of like who you are as a filmmaker, because then you can pick projects that fall in line with that. So even again, if you're not the director or the DP, you might be a gaffer, you know, the person that like sets up lights and things like that. You know, what you attach your name to also kind of leaves a through line and be like, okay, this is the type of stuff that you do. I get it. I get who you are as an artist.
I like that. So there's power to sticking to something.
Like,
and really
finding
that.
find a lane or find a voice and be very intentional about the projects that you pick. You don't have to do everything.
Because you hear a lot about like, oh, you know, try to do a little bit of everything. You never know what part's going to pop off.
I think in the beginning that's okay. But if you know who you are,
I see.
Build.
You should be discovering until you get there. And now it's like,
and then you
build. And then you create that path for
okay.
yourself, you know? So for me, I am writing and directing. So let's start with my thesis. So my thesis is an experimental narrative called Blood Sisters. And I'm really bending over. I'm not even breaking my back. Honestly, God really got me. So what I'm doing is obviously there's going to be all Black women on screen, but I'm also taking it a step further and having an all Black woman crew. And it's just meant to be a statement. I mean, unfortunately, to a degree, it's unfortunate that that's still the time that we're in, that Black art is always a statement. And how if you take it super Black as you can go, you're really saying something. But I do think that it's important that other Black women know that it's possible. You don't have to go outside of maybe who you're comfortable with or who you feel like deserves the opportunities to get things done. So I'm doing, you know, all Black woman cast and crew for my thesis. And I'm not even telling a Black woman's story, to be honest. It's really about these pivotal moments in women's lives where we kind of transcend to another step of womanhood, which is something that all women can relate to. You know, getting your period for the first time, having sex for the first time, becoming a mother. Like, these are things that as women, it doesn't matter what color you are, you understand that. And you also understand the importance of a support system and a sisterhood behind you when you go through things like that. It just happens to be that you're going to just see Black women on screen, but this is a woman's story.
Which inherently makes it through a Black lens as well.
Yeah.
Where, you know, there may be little nuances, which is, I guess, your word,
Yes.
that we see.
Yeah, there are going to be certain things that are kind of like, okay, that's a cultural thing for Black people, but then there's going to be things that you see that's just like, okay, I understand that as a woman, like, I get that for sure. And I think that there are also things that just as a human being, you have an understanding of, like a support system, people holding you up, literally and figuratively, just kind of like making sure that you're okay.
And you know what? Another reason why I think it's so important to tell Black women's stories is because even taking it out of the, you know, concept of race, just I feel like men don't watch enough things about women. Like, I don't think it's either like a chick flick and like, oh, girls are just going to go see that. But I feel like there's not much that a man, like I don't see a man watching that on TV and being really into some story about, you know, woman's first time, you know, when they start menstruation or when this or that happens. And I think that's interesting as well, that it still has to be even men kind of a part of it to make it appealing for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever notice with anything, you know, if you see Black people, it's a Black movie or it's a Black TV show. If you see women, oh, that's for women. It's for, but you never say, oh, that's a white guy's film.
And even with men, like
you'll never see it,
and you never say like, oh, I'm
it's
not gonna
something
see that.
you would never say. You know, you don't need a white entertainment TV because all of TV is white entertainment. You know what I'm saying? Or you know, you don't need a women's television or whatever it is. You know,
we have Spike TV, but then it's just dumb shit that's on there. So it's like,
but that's not a thing that's like a race thing or a gender thing. It's just like it's a niche, but you know, Black entertainment television isn't even niche. It's just Black people. You know what I mean? So I think that we also kind of have to get out of that mindset that if we see Black people in a film, it's a Black movie. Like we all deal with certain universal trials, tribulations, successes, feelings that aren't attributed to race at all. However, I also feel like we still have to push that. Okay, where it's a black movie. That's fine.
Or
That's
like,
also fine.
Like without having to explain it.
Yeah.
It's like you just don't want to have to add that extraness to it. You don't want to explain stuff. It's just you're watching this because this is
that's what I'm familiar with.
Yeah,
that's what I'm familiar with.
It's also beautiful that now is the time where we actually get that representation, whether it's being a black woman or being like a lesbian on TV, and actually showing depth of character instead of just being like the gay best friend.
Yes,
like, that
exactly.
is so refreshing to actually be able to see people that look like you on screen and that aren't just like the token black friend.
Exactly.
Which is
I
so
think
terrible.
that's really important. I saw it was something on Netflix. The kid that was dating all of these women, they had created an app, and his best friend on it was gay. But that wasn't the subplot had nothing to do with him like that really being gay. It was just like, okay, this is my friend. You know, he's like a kid of color and he's gay, but he's not my gay best friend. And I thought that just things like that are really important. It's like,
talk about it like it's regular.
Have the representation, but don't always make the representation a story. Like this thing that's so...
Because it's like you need the spaces to show that, but then it's like, but you don't want to overdo it just to like try to prove a point. And so
this is where representation behind the camera comes in.
Yeah.
I have to stress that, like, my script, for example, deals with race relations, but I have a character that is non-binary, male by gender, but presents as femme. And it's not so much about that as this parallel between, like, as a black woman being validated, that voice being validated, that perspective being validated, and for this person that's non-binary, black, queer, not being fetishized and being validated as a human being first, as opposed to some type of commodity or a piece of property to be kind of had, you know? Yeah. But again, like, towing that line, coming into that world, I know that for me, if I want to get it absolutely accurate, I need to lean on my black queer friends, and that's to be like, okay, this is a little stereotypical. We're not trying to do that. And what I also realized from writing this is, like, I don't really know a lot about how white people act. And so I don't want to make anybody in this a caricature, because if you're talking about nuance, there needs to be, you have to really, like, dig into the gray, and everybody's not just like, oh, you're white, so you're hey, this Bob. And you're you know what I'm saying? In order for this story to work, everybody has to be substantial. Right. And I think that sometimes what happens is, like, we write people, we write characters,
dumb them down, trying to
based on our own perspective, and don't try to give them substance. And then it's just like, you can tell that person is flat.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting that you think to do that, but then you watch shows where they're not giving you that same courtesy. So it's like,
I would say, like, most things don't give anybody that courtesy, but there's
so much implicit
bias.
But
that's the lens of someone who is quote unquote oppressed. Like, you're always very self-aware. The more oppressed you are, the more marginalized you are, the more self-aware you are of yourself and others. Yeah. You know, as a woman, you know, we're always mindful of men's feelings. Always. Always. It's just like, oh, but what about this? I mean,
because we're aware of ours.
We're conditioned to kind of always give men the benefit of the doubt, to always protect men. And as black women, it's even more so. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a gift and a curse.
But the best work comes out of that, I believe, and that's why such an influx of that.
It's great to be mindful, but then it's also like, at some point, when do you put yourself first?
Ooh, that's a message.
So, you know,
and I think that's not even necessarily that you're not putting yourself first, to make sure that you give attention to maybe this other white character by bringing somebody in and letting somebody else really help to make this an overall good thing. If you're not, like, you trying to make you the main character just so we can get on TV type thing, you know? So
I think the intentionality is so beautiful, in hearing you talk about, like, the micro nuances all the way to, like, the universal themes. I'm like, man, I'm so intrigued. Like, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah, man. It's if you really, well, the script is different. So, I'm going to give y'all my plan.
You're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's 2 different projects, but the idea is that the thesis garners the buzz, like the idea of man, an all black woman crew telling black woman stories that's hella black and hella woman, and hella beautiful and hella high quality and just wonderfully executed. It's like, okay, who is this person that's doing this? And then when they ask, oh, well, what else are you doing? Then it's like, here goes the script, girl.
That's true. That's
what else have
right?
you done?
Here goes
a line. Yeah, I think that that's really important. I think, you have to think ahead. You have to think ahead, because quite honestly, right now, I don't know what else I'm gonna do if it doesn't work out. I don't really have a plan B, and that's good and it's bad, but you have to have a belief in the work that you're doing. You have to have a belief in the work that you're doing and the purpose you're fulfilling. And sometimes that requires you can't put attention onto your plan A and plan B. It just doesn't really work like that.
Do you feel like you can tell a difference when you speak with or have conversations with other people who say they're in the industry or maybe filmmaking or television, whatever, and can you tell if somebody's really has a passion about it versus if they're just like in it because they're like, oh, this looks this is gonna make me feel like somebody.
I mean, you see it all the time. Everybody with a camera in their hand that's going everywhere with a camera. It's like, that's cool.
Everybody's a filmmaker now.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if they know what it is. I don't know if people are like, oh, I'm a director, or I'm a DP, or I'm a this. I'm like, do you even know?
I had a friend go on a Twitter thread the other day where I was like, that's interesting, where he's like, you know what, a lot of people are like, I'm a photographer, I'm a this, but nobody ever says like, hey, I just picked this camera and I'm interested and I'm doing things, learning it. And that made me think about things too, like, yeah, we are kind of in an era where it's like, oh, I'm a, because
you got
I'm
something.
Yeah. Oh, I done made a film, so I'm a filmmaker. It's okay to be like, hey, I'm in the process of like
learning,
exploring and learning this thing, because it's almost like we've lost the meaning of people who really do years and years of work and training and classical training.
And I think I'm just so much more sensitive about it, because it's like, listen, I've invested. I don't know, 4 years, 4 to 5 years, and I'm not worried about that.
And seeing other people who can just make some viral not little, because I don't want to mean that either, but somebody who can just make something and then it's like, boom, oh, now you can get a deal or do this or that. So
I mean, I don't compare myself to what other people are doing and how they got on. Like, listen, who is it? J. Cole, I love to see a black man get paid. I love to see a black woman get paid. So like, do what you're doing, but be very clear about like what you're doing, like,
and the bigger picture, because things can move fast and you out of here.
An event video with some cool little this and that, a filmmaker does not make. A director does not make because you shot and edited a street video, a music video. That's cool. You have to start somewhere. So like you said, I would never demean anybody, but like, you got to go a lot further than just YouTube University.
Really
if you really want to care about, and it's just like, if you want to expand and this is with anything, like if you really want to expand your way of thinking, you have to educate yourself. Me, I don't want to take like the self-educated route. I like film school. It gives me deadlines. And again, like the feedback you get, I don't think people realize how important it is to hear other people's perspectives on your work so that you can make it better. Because once it's out in the world, it's out in the world. And most of the reaction you're going to get to it is from people who have no idea about the art form.
So it's like experienced and educated feedback.
Exactly. Like stuff that'll really help you to be like, oh, okay, I didn't think of it like this. Or, okay, I see how like this little part that I overlooked that I just threw in matters, It's invaluable. And so I encourage people, even if you don't want to go to film school, you need to find other people who write. If you're a screenwriter, or if they're a DP, you need to get you a group of DP friends. If you have directors, because there's a lot, from just what you've seen of my thesis, like how much work I'm putting into it, and I'm not done. Like, I'm technically not even still done with the script, and we shoot in August. So it's a lot. It's not as simple as just picking up a camera and shooting some stuff and then figuring it out in post. Like, no, there are steps and processes to this that one should be aware of to make the best thing that they can make. And then beyond that, it's just like, work with other people. Like, I know you want that $500, you really need it, but it might be worth it for you to split that 3 ways and have a producer and have a DP so that you can focus on what you need to focus on, and then you could put it, do the editing. But you could flip a lot more with 3 people or 4 people on your crew, which is than just you.
And
like
end up with a better quality.
And end up with better quality.
I think people don't realize until they start doing that, because even with our last couple of episodes, we've talked about working with friends, for example, and then just watching this all as well and being part of some of the processes, I realized like how intricate it really is. And then especially when you deal with clients who may like need work like this, and I might be thinking like, oh yeah, I just need somebody to come out here with a light, a camera, but then you really like see all of the pieces, and it's like, man, it's so extra. It's so much more than you think just to do, a 2-minute like a really good video. Like, it's a lot. And so my biggest thing too is I'm like, how do y'all afford this, especially when you're in a program, when you're in school? How do you afford to shoot and to do film when you're in these creative spaces? It's like you have to work so hard to like prove yourself or to make a name to get the attention and the funds. But what are you doing to make something so good without the funds?
I think I'm still,
or you might be rich. I don't know.
Stop, girl, speak that thing into existence. I'm
rich.
Like, I'm rich.
We claim
My
it.
bank account don't reflect, but I'm rich. I'm wealthy.
Okay.
I got all that. Okay.
All of it.
But I think to be a filmmaker, especially like a director, you have to be able to sell yourself. And I'm learning that, like, you have to have an open mouth. I don't mean also as a producer, because the producer is the person that really like makes sure it gets done. So the producer does a lot of fundraising. They do a lot of asking for stuff, like, hey, can we get this? Finding things. Like, if you're the person who loves to make the connections and knows the people who are the plug, if you're the plug, you would probably make a good producer. You also have to be organized. But yeah, just as a filmmaker, you can't be shy. And I'm learning that, like,
you can't be that artist who's like in the corner with their art.
If you want to build a crew and you ain't got no money to pay them, you need to sell your vision. Like, you need to let them know, like, yes, you're doing this for free, but this is something that could really change the trajectory of your career, or it could be a really great opportunity for you. I mean, I can't pay anybody on my crew right now, but they know that they're going to be on a team full of Black women telling stories about Black women. And when do you get the opportunity to do that? It's rare. It's rare. I've never been on a set with all Black women. I've had the opportunity to direct an all woman crew twice, and that was phenomenal. So I wonder how it will be now. But these are opportunities that you can't just overlook. And so I think that that's kind of what it is. It's like, you have to understand what you're bringing to the table if it's not money, because money is not always the best form of payment.
And sometimes
you just ain't got it.
More work for the vision.
But if your vision is clear, if it's strong, and if you really have an appreciation for people, you know what I try to tell people is like, listen, I don't have any money to pay you right now, but I'll make sure you don't have to pay to be on this production. I want to make sure you're well fed. I want to make sure that you have everything you need, and I want to make sure that the vibe is right for you. But let's like really make history. Let's focus on making history and you doing what you do to the best of your ability. So that's what I'm learning is, just to ask. Closed mouths don't get fed. But then also, I'm not just asking for help. I'm not just begging for help. Like, I brought the vision to the table. So it's like, you trying to get on this ride or no? You know,
an opportunity to be a part of this vision that's going to impact so many other people. And that's when you have your most loyal team, like your best working team. Because people, when the money run out, a lot of people be gone.
Hello.
Yeah, there are some projects where if there's money involved, but I'm still like, I don't want to do it. But there's some people, especially just the people, like, you really feel like this is going somewhere, so you can support that
exactly
easier, because it just feels more like,
and that goes
more connected.
And that goes to character. Like, you got to make sure your character is clean. Who said that? That's a lyric, you know what I'm saying? But you got to get your soul clean. You know what I'm saying? Freeway said that. Shout out to Philadelphia Freeway. Got to get your soul clean. So integrity in who you are as a person. That's the other thing. Not that I'm learning, because I was already knowing that, but like, using that as a vehicle to bring people aboard. It's just like, it's really simple.
Authentic,
be an authentic person, be a good person, be a person of your word, be honest with people. If you ain't got it, you ain't got it. But if you got the vision, that's good enough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The vision and the heart shine through.
Hello.
Yeah.
Every
People
time.
seeing that you're about what you're saying you're about, honestly.
Every time. You know what I'm saying?
Because you'd be
Like,
surprised when it's like, I could have been asking, for help a long time ago. Or I could have said, something and people would have been like, oh, I'll help you or I'll do this or that a long time ago. And it's like, oh, it really does hold a lot of weight.
It does. It really does. So I think just like being a good person who has a clear vision and you've shown consistently who you are to people like, and you've told me this before, people always be trying to be like, hey, what's up? How can I help? Because they just want to be a part of something. And so I think having an understanding that you're also bringing something to the table, even if it's not money, is good for people.
And that being said, now is a good opportunity to express what are your needs right now with your thesis. Like if there's, I don't know, any physical things, money, whatever it is, like what types of stuff.
Money is always great, but I'm really interested in, goods and services that people have. There are so many intricate things. Like we got to feed people, we got to make sure people got water and juice. We got to have hair, wigs and tracks and things like that. Makeup. I'm just trying to think outside of the box as much as I can, cosmetics,
that's the stuff that adds up
skincare.
too.
Exactly. Food is a big one. Clothes are a big one. If somebody's like, hey, we got a $500 or $1,000 gift card to shop here, I send it my way.
Right. It's going to be a Fashion Nova flick.
Okay, honestly, shouts out to Fashion Nova,
right.
Shouts out to Akira, whoever want to give up that bread. So it's stuff like that. It's not always about giving money. Money is great. I'll never turn down anybody's money, but if there's other things that you feel like you could give, some kind bars. Hey, I get hungry on set. I'll take some. Okay, hello. You see what I'm saying? Some granola bars, some Red Bulls. So
right.
hello, coffee. Coffee. It's definitely a big one. Those are the things, needs and goods and services and money. That would be great.
So for anybody listening, if anything rang true to you, if you believe in the mission, hit Briana Clearly up on, I'm going to just say Instagram.
Yeah, you can hit
it.
me on the IG. I'll send you the young synopsis.
She can tell you a little bit more about what she's working on, maybe, on a person by person basis, or depending on what your connect might be or how you could be a part of it. But we always want to, I guess, emphasize that, with what we're talking about, with guests, what they're talking about, like, you can connect. Like, that's kind of the point. It's like we're trying to connect all of these dots. So
just come correct, man. Just have respect.
Yeah, right.
Just have respect for people.
And our followers, they got you.
Yeah, we have to say this.
You're right.
We could get into a whole nother slew of
things that don't come across a certain way.
You know what I'm saying? We could get into a whole nother conversation. We could do a whole nother episode about communication, respectful communication, and not feeling that just because you have the power to give that it entitles you to anything
or to talk to people any kind of way.
Hello. So, but that's something else. But yeah, man, hit me up. We can talk about the project, what I do, who I am, and y'all can get these little tidbits of wisdom and
what's that Instagram one more time?
BS. On my IG story at Briana Clearly, Briana Clearly.
Well, thank you for sharing your vision and your heart. It's always a good time when Briana's around. We always end.
I wanted to shoot the shit with y'all a little bit more. I thought we was gonna talk about some ratchet.
Right. Look, but you had so much to say just about
once we change this at the cup.
Girl, you blew my mind. I was in here just like, oh my God, I didn't even know all that stuff happened behind the scenes.
Girl.
And I'm trying to figure out how I can support you. So y'all for real hit her up. Let her know how you can support or how you want to be a part of her amazing projects and all the stuff she's working on.
No, if you got some lashes, you could send those too. We might need some lashes on set.
Had them looking right.
Okay.
Right. Because
some jewelry.
That's one thing.
Exactly.
It ain't about like, we just gonna need stuff and we're gonna take it. Like, you're in credits of a thesis that's then gonna win awards. Like, they get Emmys for these things, right?
All the awards.
Look, they gonna come on stage. I supplied the lashes.
Yeah, festivals. If y'all some film festival people, I'm just saying. We need all the cheat codes.
All of them.
Okay.
But we always end with a question of the week. And then this question is, where can I be brave? Ooh.
Ask Briana first.
Briana? I know, I'm like,
Where, as in a location, or just where in your
However
life?
however you interpret that.
I think stepping outside of that comfort zone is always a sign of bravery. It's always an act of bravery, I should say. So if it's seeing someone and you want to say something to them, give them a compliment, rather than having that second thought of, no, let me not do that, just give that person a compliment. These are ways to connect with people, just by saying that thing, that kind thing that's on your mind to them. You just never know. You really can make someone's day. You can make a friend. You can make a connect. And it's in a very genuine way. So I just say, step outside of that comfort zone. Don't overthink. And I say this to you guys as I say it to myself. Don't overthink it. If it's on your heart to do it, then do it. And I think that that's always an act of bravery.
Ooh, I like that. For me, and your response led right into mine, is taking action. Like, even when I don't have all the answers, or I don't think I have everything together, a plan executed this week is way better than a perfect one next week, because nothing's ever perfect. And I'm just preaching to myself. So
what
I was going to say was, like,
perfect is the enemy of the good. Good.
Yeah. But I would say another thing about where I can be brave would be in putting yourself, or myself, I guess, putting myself out there more to intentionally, I guess, sell myself even more directly. Because I feel like, there's a lot of people who like, oh yeah, girl, go girl, we support you, blah, blah, blah. But then I could actually be on my list looking at specific things like, Briana, this is something that I'm working on or need, or I'm trying to push, or whatever. Like, let's really talk about it, instead of all the like, but then really still doing everything yourself. Yeah. So I think really kind of going back to like what I used to do more in DC days, like actual like networking, like looking for people and going out and setting out to have conversations and talking to them about things. Whereas now it's just kind of chilling and let what happen. And
being proactive.
Yeah, right? Being a little more proactive about it, and not all the way on like the imposter syndrome way, but like being more like, like this is what I'm doing, and like really putting it out there more so than letting people happen to stumble across and be like, oh, this looks cool, which is what they'll say anyway. So why not be like, look at this cool thing? Yeah,
and I guess there's two schools of thought, but I think they both kind of serve the same ideas. Like, you can ask with the expectation of no, or you can ask knowing that the worst thing that you're going to get is a no. But the point is like, it doesn't really matter. Like, get in the habit of asking. Yeah. Get in the habit of saying, hey, I could use this, or hey, I would really like to collaborate with you. And a lot of times, sometimes people, if they can't do it,
because I don't think it's so much being worried about getting rejected. It's not thinking, like, making sure like, I can really do this, like reaching for something higher, like a higher brand or something, and being like, this is what I'm trying to do, like, let's do something, and feeling like, yes, I can support that. Versus
and a lot of times a lot of times when it is a no, it might be like a no, but
but
I can put you,
I can connect you.
I can get you this, I can give you this, or I can connect you with this person who might be better suited for that. But it's kind of like, say something. If you say something, then you might get further than if obviously you're always going to get further than if you say nothing. So I think it's just always just about being like, don't be afraid of that no. Yep. Don't be afraid of the no.
Like Carlie said, we appreciate you coming on today. We hope that especially for the listeners who are in like the creative fields, that they kind of got something out of that you're brave enough to really kind of claim like what you care about, and then make your art like really push that forward. That's what Briana's doing, so I really appreciate the work she's doing. We want to support that however we can. And y'all
can go to my website and see some of my work, BrianaClearly.com.
The book she wrote as well. So
I know I wrote a book. It's on BrianaClearly.com. Like, everything that I do is on a website, which I need to get revamped. Lex.
Girl, look, I need to revamp mine.
Speaking of asking for help. But check out, if you guys actually like want to get in tune with me and talk to me, check me out on Instagram. If you want to kind of just poke around and lurk and stalk me, you can go on BrianaClearly.com. And that's where you can find me and all of my stuffs.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.